I do have Jeffrey Hackett on, and Jeff Hackett is a good friend. He's also like high up on the chain of POC official, and so he comes to
Oh,
us
man.
representing our national office, ERDO. And here's what I thought. I thought as we start church plants, one of the things that I found is when I started the church that missions, the idea of missions giving. So we wanted to be a missions church right off the hop. And like, you know, we wanted to hit missions and do that well. But at the same time, I had all these people who weren't even Christians yet. They were just coming to faith. They were just exploring. And so it's like, how do I get people that are just coming to faith to actually care about reaching people for Jesus around the world? And I felt like the best conduit into that was kind of the social side of things, and to say, let's care, like everybody says, let's care for the poor and the hungry. Let's care about getting educated kids. Let's care about these kind of things and responding to need around. And so I felt like from the get-go, ERDO was a nice fit for us to kind of get people hungry on a mission side. And so I think as a church plant, it's a good window and a good conduit in. And so I thought I'd just have Jeff talk for a couple minutes today before we kind of get into the other, just a little bit about ERDO for those who don't know what ERDO is, and then kind of just tell a little bit about what's going on with that. So go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. Hey, Jay, thanks. Thanks, everybody, for letting me take a little bit of time. And let me just bring a point of clarification. I am low on the totem pole when we talk about the national office. If you ever seen the series Designated Survivor, I'm the guy they put off in the building. And if a nuclear bomb happens, oh, stink, he's the only one left. So there you go. So that's who I am. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but it's good to be here. And Jay, thanks for having me on. And it's funny, I just watched that whole series, and how that's a quick parallel to who I am. And not knowing what I do, but I work for ERDO, and ERDO simply is the humanitarian arm of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada. And I can't help but mirror Jason's thoughts of when you're starting a new church, when you're starting and the foundations and the building blocks, you're putting a lot of effort into, as Jay's going to talk about in a few minutes, welcoming people, branding, make sure that you have the 5 O's or the 5 arrows in your branding, not 3, and then you're handing out free t-shirts for the next 2 months. But whatever it might be, you're doing a lot of groundwork. And I can't help but mirror Jay's thoughts when missions and mission-minded needs to be one of those core foundations. As you as a church planner are missional in your community, what does that look like when you're missional, you know, internationally? And it can be a daunting task. You can look at missions, and you can look at social justice, you can look at how we're feeding people, and it just seems to be overwhelming. And at the best of times it is, and at the worst of times it is. So there are 3 major components that make up ERDO. The first one is our child sponsorship. Currently right now, ERDO sponsors over 8,300 children per month. And that is through churches, youth groups, donors all across Canada that have chosen to partner and be part of our ERDO story. And I'm sure you're using that sort of vernacular lately. Hey, be a part of our story. And so 8,300 sponsors across that impact children's lives on a monthly basis. The second component is our community development, where we partner with our global workers, partner with the national partners on the ground, where we provide biosand filters, feeding programs, educational programs for the programs that are in the country. And the third component, third pillar that makes up ERDO is our crisis response. And crisis response, if you're taking notes, can be broken down into 3 categories. Perpetual poverty is one. People that are born into poverty, they didn't have a choice. We have that perpetual poverty. We have natural disasters, hurricane, flood, fire, whatever you can put into that category. And the third one is political conflict. And political conflict is one current situation we're dealing right now. How many of you have heard of Yemen? Yemen, give me a hand, give me a show of hands, wave, blink, I don't know, do something. 2.1 million refugees currently right now in Yemen. And when you look at that, when you see the number, that just seems like, what gives on that, right? And how do you respond? And so ERDO is actually responding to the Yemen crisis. And so we've been given a group of people that we work with, and we raise resources. And so that is ERDO: crisis response, community development, and childcare development. Those are our three main pillars that make up ERDO. So how do you play a role? How do you, as a new church, a planning church, growing church, church trying to figure out COVID and all that, how does ERDO fit into the narrative of who you are? Well, I would recommend, and I would say this, that right from the beginning, missions needs to be in your DNA, needs to be in your budget line item and whatever that might look like. And what I'm saying here today is this: one of the options that we have is get your church to sponsor a child. Sponsoring a child is, if we're talking budget-wise, it's $41 a month, $498 a year. So when you look at your overall budget, it's not a really big, significant cost when you think about all the other things and components that are going on. But it makes a huge impact, not only in your church, but in the child's life. And I don't know, you might be a sponsor here, and you might write to your sponsor and your child, and you might get your kids to write to your child. I know for our family, we sponsor a girl. She's in Burkina Faso. She has special needs. And so for us, I remember the day when we were picking our sponsor child, we had like 3 or 4 of them on the table. And we're heartbroken, because my pastoral heart says, I'll take them all. I'll take all of them. And my wife, the pragmatic person, goes, okay, that's good, and we need to be like that, but we need to pay our mortgage as well, and we need to feed our own kids. And so you always have that balance. But for us, it was important for us as a family. And when I think of church, I think of it as a family, to say, hey, we're going to do this. And you know, the initial thing might be a little bit, oh, how are we going to make it work? But amazingly, when you begin to give to missions, you begin to unlock what I call kingdomnomics, where things just begin to make sense and budgets begin to get met. And because you're missional, you're living by faith, and you're trusting God that God will provide. And more often than not, God provides in amazing ways. So I've been only given 3 to 5 minutes, and I don't want Jay to go, oh, I gave him 3, it took 20. So here's the deal. I'm sending you all my email right now in the group chat, jeff.hackett@ERDO. If you want to continue the conversation of what that might look like, it may not be as sponsoring a child as a church. It may be, hey, we want to give towards a project, or we want to bring a biosand filter in the homes of Honduran people for $250. We want to be part of something, and I want to help you to be a part of ERDO's story. So there's my contact, jeff.hackett. Drop me an email. Let's pick up the conversation, and let me come alongside you to help you with your missional initiatives, and let's do some amazing things together in this world that will just change not only who you are, your church, and people that you may never meet, and you'll have an impact. Trust me, you won't regret it. And that is my elevator speech. The bottom guy on the totem pole, the designated survivor. That's me.
Thanks, Jeff.
And, yeah.
That's awesome. What does ERDO stand for?
Good call. I have a t-shirt for that as well. Emergency Relief Development Overseas. So Emergency Relief and Development Overseas. You can check out our brutal website, and I'm very honest with that, erdo.ca, ERDO.ca. You can, there he is. You can navigate it, and but check it out. Don't judge us by our website. Trust me, we're working on it.
So just for those who don't know, so this is kind of like you can do like a compassion child or like a world vision child, but it's administered like through, is it through PAYOC, or how's that work?
It's administered actually through us. ERDO is actually a separate organization from the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada. So all the funds and resources are directed in and through ERDO. We are just the humanitarian arm, and we're a separate organization, so we can go into places that Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada cannot go into.
Good. So I just think this is a good one. It's on the ground. We know the missionaries, where the money goes. It's not like being funneled. There's not a huge percentage piece off the top. Some of the missions organizations out there take a massive cut.
Yeah, I drive a Mazda 3, everybody. A Mazda 3. Again, pretty low.
But yet he's like, woo, woo. No, just kidding. So, So I will say this: it's a great organization to get started with. Fully endorse, 100%, and it's just a great door into missions. It's a great way into this. One of the guys who was on the call last time, he's planted a church in Toronto, a Ugandan church, and he was a sponsor child. Like, he's one of our pastors now. He was on the call last month with us. He grew up, and his deal was he got sponsored, and that's the reason that he got to go to school. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got to go to school. He was one of 12 kids, got sponsored, was able to go to school, and then when he graduated, he wanted to come to Canada to basically say thanks and try and work his life. So he's come here. He's planted a church. He works with a social as a social worker, and then he's planted a church here, and then sends money back to sponsor kids in where he's from again. So it's like, how cool is that? Like, that's one of our own, and that's the story. Never would have, never would have went to school, never would have done any of those things without someone. So I just think that's kind of a cool deal. So anyways, thanks, Hackett. Good to have you on. And as you saw, Hackett's email is there. Get in touch with ERDO. They'll come in, they'll kind of customize it however you want at your church. And yeah, it'll work. So good.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
I'll leave now. And remember, I'm in the far off distance. If a bomb happens, you know where to get me.
Okay. So what I wanted to talk about now is just the idea of welcoming. How do we welcome well? And so I want to talk for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it back to have some group discussion, and then we'll go into it there. And so the reason that I want to talk about this, I was saying to somebody, I was in a church just very recently, within the last few weeks. And as I was in the church, the senior pastor of the church, thinking he was doing good, he wasn't trying to be a jerk, but he's like, welcome everybody. And he's like, and today we have a special guest we want to welcome. And he walked down off the stage with a wireless mic. And he's like, so we have these guests, and I thought he was going to introduce me, but he came to a family that was their first time there ever. And he's like, these are their first time ever here. And he gives them the mic, and he said, why don't you stand up and tell us a bit about yourselves, and put the mic right in their face. And they just turned beet red. Like, they were so nervous, embarrassed, shy. I thought the mom was going to start to cry, and he wouldn't let up. And then he like, finally the guy just, told us their names and sat down, and they were just, I could just tell they were like completely overwhelmed. And after the service, the pastor came to me. He's like, oh, it's so great to have these guys as first-time guests. And I was like, dude, you know, he was so excited on his welcoming of them. He's like, I went over the top. I stopped the service for them. And I was like, dude, I don't think they're coming back. Like, you know what I mean? They were like so overwhelmed and so nervous by everything. And so I thought, how do we welcome well? And so I want to talk a few principles, and you can think about these as we talk and set a tone. So first one, and this is the given, nothing's rocket science here, but just as we go through, here's what I want you to do is think about maybe one or two of these things that you could circle back in your deal and revisit, okay? So the first one is online presence. And so the first impressions, almost nobody will come to your church today without looking at your website first. That's just a given. And so your website needs to be crafted. Who is your website for? Is it for insiders or outsiders? Here's what I find. Your own church people hardly look at your website, but the newcomers visit it a ton. And so many times our website is geared for the insiders, but it's really the outsiders that do most of the checking. The insiders, they might go to online services and see what time things are at, but other than that, they don't check it a ton. But the outsiders, they look at their primary things they go to are staffing, who's the staff and what do they look like, and they look at the history of the place. Those are the things that most new people would say. They want to see the history of the church, where did it come from, and then who the staff are, and can I identify with those people? So a couple things. Online presence. Does your church have a Facebook page or social media? So that's another thing. So chances are most people these days would say that they follow you online for weeks before coming. So what kind of posts do you have? Do you have a good online presence? Do you have a good Instagram? Do you have a good Facebook? Don't be ranting about things. Don't be ranting about the government. Don't be ranting. politically, that kind of stuff. Don't be negative on other churches or ministries. I hear this sometimes, and people unload on other ministries or churches, and it's like, what are you doing? You've just shot yourself in the foot for welcoming new guests. So don't do any of that kind of thing on there. When it comes to your web page itself, are they inspirational posts? Is there coming events? Is there ways to engage? I think most people, when they look at it, they say, could I fit here? Is there people represented on that page? Does it look like I could fit if I showed up there? And that's what they're looking at. A couple things. Do you have a Facebook rating, a Google rating? And so those are things to check out. Those are things to get some of your people to put on there, because people look at that. So if it's rated, and everyone checks rating, my son doesn't go to a restaurant without checking the rating of a restaurant before going these days. Likewise, most people will check a church. Is it rated a 5-star or is it rated a 1? Is there comments on there that are negative? And if so, have you responded to those comments that are negative? Have you tried to address those with people? And so looking at that, if you have never looked at that, I would encourage you, check that out. What is your rating? So that's social media. Google ease. So I asked, is your church easy to find on Google? So I encourage you to go to a number of people and ask, Google my church and see how long it takes you to find my church. Is your name too generic, or is it too specific to find? And so those are questions. We had a challenge with this when I was in Waterdown. We were called Community Church, and it was such a generic name that it sometimes became a challenge. And so we had to work on that. One of the other things too is it easy to find your church, or can it be confused with another one? And so this was a challenge for us. So another church in town, I call it church, but it was actually a cult that was in Hamilton that the CBC did a story on. They branded themselves, we were called Community Church. They branded themselves One Community Church, and they had almost the same logo. And it caused major challenges for us. So we had to work through that and know that going in. And so ask yourself, when people are looking for you, what do they find? The name needs to be clear and easy to find. Service info. Are your service times easy to find? Are they on how many clicks? It should never be more than 2 clicks to find when and where your services are. If it is, it's too much. And so I would challenge you to go to a few people that don't go to your church and say, hey, can you find my service times easy enough? And I'll be honest with you, I go to churches almost every weekend. I'm in a different church. More than 80% of churches fail this because I try and not ask the pastor what time or where it is, and I try and find it online. And almost always I struggle with this, almost always. And so I would challenge you to make that and have a bunch of people look at that and say, hey, could you find this? Here's what I find in churches. This is the big mistake. They have their service times in one area, and they sometimes have a banner, but then it's different. So if there's especially churches that are on the move and they go and it's changed locations, or they've changed the times and they haven't updated every area of their website. So is the services easy? Does your church come up when it comes to the service times and info? Does your church come up on Google Maps easy enough? So this was an issue for us in Waterdown. So people would find it, but we were in Millgrove, Flamborough Center, Waterdown, Hamilton. And so we had like 4 addresses. And sometimes, your address doesn't necessarily match the community you're in, and Google Maps sometimes is hard to find. And so just make sure Google Maps is easy to find it with. Are your bus stops and closest bus routes listed on there? And so that's a big one as well. Do people have public transit, easy access to where you're at, and it's listed for them so that they know, okay, I need to take this bus or this bus, and this is the closest stop to my church. This is where to get off. So have that service info. Back to online presence, website versatility. Have you checked your website out with different kinds of phones? And this is a big one. So sometimes, it works good on one browser, but you haven't checked it on Chrome, or you haven't checked it on Internet Explorer, you haven't checked it on Safari. Have you checked it on all the different platforms and make sure it works? Have you checked it for mobile capability? Does it work on an Android? Does it work on an Apple? What is your phone? What does it look like when I load it on my phone or my iPad or my computer? Go through and make sure that it's welcoming on all those fronts. Back to the content. Is it design contemporary? Is there videos that show what it is? Is there Christianese on the website? Is there those kind of things? Like just making sure, get non-believers to look at your website and just ask people, can you just take a look at this? And I'll pay you $20 to just go through and tell me what you think. and you'll be surprised at what you come out with at the other side of that. So number one, online presence. Number two, exterior impressions. So what are the first impressions when people come up to your facility or building? So signage, number one. Is there a sign that they can read from the road at highway speed or the speed limit wherever your area is? And if not, then you need to work on that. Even if you don't own the building, get some A-frames out there, get some signage out on the lawn. Last week I was in a church and I even had it on Google Maps and I drove by it twice. And I was like, wow. And they didn't have a sign out front and it was set back in and there's trees in front of it. And so I just encourage you to make sure your signage visibility, is it attractive? Or is the times listed, blah, blah, blah. When it comes to your building, do you know where your main entrance is? This is seems like common sense because you've come to your building a bunch of times, but it's not always the case. And so we had that in our building, and we had to work at trying to make the main entrance easily identifiable. Even if you're in a rented facility, does it look good? Some of the churches Rob has one of these tents. When you come in, it's outside and they've got this Promise Church tent. It's bright, it's fresh, and you see it from like a long distance away. And it's like, oh, that looks great. It's just that first impression is really good. And so they set that pop-up tent out every week. I think you still do, Rob. And it just looks so good when you come there. So are the grounds maintained? Sometimes I've heard from church planters and they say, well, I don't own it, I don't control it. You need to make sure it's done well, even if the owner of the property doesn't. And so we used to be in this Montessori school and we didn't own the property and they would never cut the grass there. And so I just started cutting the grass. I'd go there on Saturday night and cut the grass, even though it wasn't our responsibility, but I wanted it to look good when people came, you know what I mean? We painted some things and asked the owner, even though we didn't own it and it wasn't our responsibility, in community center, whatever, just you can work on some of those things. Parking is the next thing. Is it easy to find a parking spot? Is it well laid out? Is it clear? Even if you have crappy parking, you can do a lot with signage. You can do a lot with parking people out there. You can do a lot with just sign people saying welcome. One of the things that we started with is that we just put a speaker outside and it just set a tone for people as soon as they exited their cars. Like there was a welcoming environment with music on outside and it's just like, whoa, you come into somewhere, it's like something's happening here. It's, that spot when someone's getting out of the car and they're nervous to go to church for the first time, they're like, And if they open their door and it's like, oh, it's inviting right from the second I open my door, that goes a long ways. And so think about some of those things. The sign people, Blair's church does a really good job at this of just having like, we're glad you're here signs and just sticking a few people out there. And it means so much as you come in. The church where my wife's on staff, Mapleview, they put a bunch of flags. So they bought some of those like sale flags, you've seen those at things. And they spent like $500 on flags. And they bought, literally, they probably have 50 flags. And every Sunday morning they go out and they put them in. And as you drive in, it's like, whoa, something is going on here. As you drive in the laneway, it's just covered in these flags all the way up the driveway and all the way up. And it's like, it just gives you a presence of like, oh, first impression is like, hey, something's happening here. This is good. So just things from the outside like that. So that's first impressions on the facility. Third. So online first impressions on the facility, then pre-service impressions. So front door, how are they greeted at the front door? Are people friendly, sincere? The best training you should do is those first people on the front door. The most effort and training you put into any volunteer should be those people. How your language is used is important. Do they use language like, is it your first time here? That's the wrong question because, if they've been coming for a while, they instantly feel offended. So the question is, oh, how long have you been coming to the church if they don't really know them? You know what I mean? And it just, it eases it in and it makes that a little simpler as they come in. Did they hand them off to someone else? So our greeters at the door knew that if there's a guest with us for the first time, they can't just like let them go, but they would always hand them off to the next person. So they'd take them into the auditorium room where the coffee was and say, oh, can I get you a coffee? And like just hand them off to the next person. These people are new and you can kind of give them that best experience. Do you know what I mean when it comes to that? Do we make personal connections in the lobby? Do we have some things to help them with that? One of the things that we did was when we would hand them off to the coffee person, we had the coffee sleeves. And if it was a guest that was new, then they would always put that coffee sleeve on, so then everybody else knew that that person was new. And it was like the person didn't realize that they had like a sign on them that I'm new. But for all of us who were leaders, we knew that was the sign that they're new. And so then it was like easy for people to find those people, and they didn't have to ask. They just go up and like, oh, they have, and it was like not overwhelming, like, hey, we got a sign on you, but it was just a subtle little cue for other people to know to connect with them in that way. So other pre-service things, is your signage good? Is the bathrooms easy to find? I was in a church not long ago, and I had to go to the washroom, and I went looking for the washroom and I could not find it. And so I went down the hall, and then this lady started to chew me out because I was in the kids area and I didn't even know. And I was the speaker. And so imagine if it's like a guest that had never been there before, you know what I mean? And so I just want to encourage you, like, have good signage. Where's the kids area check-in? Where's the info area? And just, you can do a lot with portable signage and A-frames and all that kind of stuff. Children, obviously, where your children are checked in, how they're checked in, all those kind of things needs to be clear, safe, friendly. You get that. Children's greeters, all that kind of thing. Have some of them have like a mascot where that greets the kids as they come in, or something like exciting like that. Not a clown, but a mascot. And you can do something along those lines. In the auditorium, when they come in pre-service, did someone help them find a seat? Is there spoken or unspoken rules over your seats? So this is a big thing for me. So as someone that goes into churches often, I've had 3 times already this year, and we had COVID, so I didn't go to churches for a long time. So in the limited time that I have, I've had 3 times where people have said, "You're in my seat." And I was like, wow, this is in 2020 at churches that are mostly new. And I had people move my stuff, and I put it down like early, and then they moved it and they're like, "Sorry, that's my seat." As a pastor, you need to be thinking through, is this happening in my church? Don't be saying it doesn't happen. You can't control it, but you can work on it if you're seeing it kind of develop. And so creating an environment for people to find a seat that's good. And they're probably thinking the same thing. Am I in someone's seat? Can I sit here? Can I sit anywhere? You know, having some concierge people to help people find seats is always good. When they come in the auditorium, is it warm, welcoming, attractive? One of the big mistakes that I find churches do, and I'm not hating on pre-service prayer here, don't get me wrong, but there's a time and a place for pre-service prayer. And I would say to you, 5 minutes, 15 minutes before the service is not the time and place for pre-service prayer. That's the time you need to be out with the people. That's the time you need to be connecting with people. So many times I go into church and all the leadership leave, and there's this vacuum, and all these new people are there. And the thing about guests is they often come early or they come late. They don't usually come on time. And so oftentimes there's some of the first people there, and all the leadership leave, and it's this vacuum. It's like, dude, you've got only a handful of minutes with those people. You need to take that time, and that time is gold. There is a time for pre-service prayer, but I want to challenge you, not 5 minutes before the service when the people are arriving is the time to go in there. Also, guests are like, when all the leaders go into this room and huddle, it looks weird. It looks creepy. They come out, they don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden they come out, it's overwhelming. So I want to encourage you when it comes to that pre-service environment is really important. Is there stuff on the screen? Is there music? I want to tell you, a guest coming in, that's the time they feel the most awkward, is before the service begins. And they're just like feeling weird, and they're questioning what's going on. And so setting that environment, setting some countdown announcements, setting some things that make it easy is really important. Did you start the service on time? Especially as a newcomer, they're coming there and then they're like, okay, I came here like 10 minutes early and the thing didn't start for, I sat here for 20 minutes before it began, really. You know what I mean? So working on those kind of things, really important. So pre-service impressions, really, really key. I'm going to skip over like in-service welcoming, and we'll hit that another time. I want to go to post-service impressions. So at the end of the service, this is where they decide if they're coming back or not. This is when they decide, hey, was it a good experience or not a good experience? So was there a newcomer gift? Is there something like that said, hey, that reminds them to come back, whether it's a pen, whether it's a mug? We've done some crazy things over the time. For a while, we had all these old ladies make jam, and they made like homemade jam, and then we labeled it and made it all nice. And that actually was really well received. We've done beach balls, frisbees, mugs, like you name it, like weird stuff, t-shirts, socks. Carla got socks made that one time, and people like they just were like a nice comfy pair of socks with our swag on it, and people are like less likely to throw them out. They're like, oh, these are nice socks, I'll wear them, I'll put them in the rotation. And so just random things that you can do to like connect with them. Was there a visitor card, and was it push versus pull? Sometimes we like demand they fill it out in order to get the free gift, and that seems like really not welcoming to me. Do you know what I mean? It's like you have to sign up to get this. And so do we make them sign, or do we give them and say, here's this if you want to fill this out online later, or here is if you want to fill it out, but don't force them to do it, to hand it in and then we'll give you a free gift. If the info was given, did we tell them? People are really weirded out about giving info these days, and so they want to know what you're going to do with it. So was it clearly told, okay, if you give us your info, this is what we're going to do with it? You know, and so we would try and make it clear, we're going to send you one email and one email only. We're not going to put you on a mailing list for forever. You can opt into it. So they know what they're getting into if they give you their info. And so just be clear with that. Is there lobby or greeting moments at the end of it? So one of the things that we used to do is say that we're going to have a building tour. And so we would have people like, hey, there's going to be a pastor at the back and they'll take you on a building tour. And it was just a way to connect people, or a board member at the back, answer questions. And so it just gave people that like next level of engagement, to take them on a tour of the building and say, okay, this is what we do. And tell them some history, or, you know, this is where we do kids, blah, 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 or whatever, you know what I mean? And so that's like an easy step there. The next is their connecting point. So is there a way for them to volunteer easy? Is there a place for them to know how to take those next steps? Small groups. Is there an area for them to sign up, to know where the small groups, to know who the leaders are they interesting? New believer. Is there a follow-up if there was a gospel presentation? Giving. A lot of people want to know about giving. Was it easy to find? Is it electronic giving? You know, what are those kind of things? Is there an info table with all that you offer at the church and someone knowledgeable to answer questions at it? So those are just the post-service things. I think those, we sometimes forget about how important that post-service connecting is. We often think about the beginning, we forget about the end. And so just want to encourage you on that. And then follow-up. How are you doing your follow-up? Do they get an email the same day? Do they get it that week? Is it personable, or does it look like a form letter? I always think that when you write a letter, it kind of means a lot. If they actually gave us their address, we would drop a little care pack off at their house and just leave it on the door. So it wasn't overly like, hey, we're stalking you creepy. It was just like, we actually took the time to go to your house, drop it off. And we would always bring something nice, like someone made cookies, or we used to have this lady in our church that made amazing pies, and we would put it in a nice box and drop a pie off at their house. Who doesn't love that? And so you have to just figure out what your follow-up engagement looks like. Is there options for people to follow up online, Zoom, text, chat, you know, whatever those are, as far as that goes? The last one I want to just talk about, and I'm going along here, but what was the online church experience welcoming like as well? A lot of us are in the online world now, and there's a lot of people engaging online. So was your online service easy to find? This is a thing that's actually challenging sometimes, is where on your website, where is it listed? Is your YouTube channel, all those things? Ask others, is it easy to find? Was I greeted when I came in? So many times I go to a lot of online services on a weekend, and one of the things that's nice is when I jump on, they have somebody there to acknowledge me on there, and they just say, hey, welcome, it's good to have you here on the chat. Like they'll send me a private chat, and just there's somebody there, just that's their job, just to say welcome to me. It's not overbearing, and they're not asking my info. They're just saying, hey, welcome, we acknowledge that you're here. Was there an opportunity for follow-up even on the online service? And so it's an online platform, and so people probably want online back. And so is there opportunity to do a personal Zoom with one of the pastors? Is there opportunity if you'd like a text back? If there's, you know, whatever those platforms are, to respond on that. One of the big things is, were people introduced when they were speaking? So many times on our online platforms, there's all these people, and people are like, who are these people leading? But like, was the introduced, hey, I'm Jason, I'm the pastor, welcome today, I'm going to be sharing. The person doing announcements, I'm so-and-so, and this is my role at the church. Those kind of things are helpful. Was I unconsciously told that this service was less because it was online? That's a big one. And so sometimes it's like, okay, well, you're here, but if you really want to come to the service, you got to be in person. You know what I mean? And so how was I treated when it comes to that? So just a few thoughts around that. What I'd like to do is just, I was going to break you into some smaller groups to just chat about it for a second or two. But we're a smaller group today, so maybe we can just open it up. Is there any thoughts around the welcome ideas?
Man, that was brilliant. I'm not gonna lie, the whole time I was going through the website and I'm just finding wrong dates, wrong addresses, wrong everything. And it's like, I have the one spot for it. I'm realizing it's like in 4 other spots that was never updated. It's like, oh goodness.
And that's almost every church. Seriously, and that's almost every church. It's because there's those hidden spots you forget about.
Yeah. Like there's even a little Q&A part that I guess we had. The last question is, where do you meet? It's like, oh, we meet at Belmore School at 11 a.m. every Sunday. It's like, no, we don't. Bronson. So no, that's really good. That's a good word there. That's awesome.
Good. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
It's also really helpful if you keep your staff lists up to date on your website. I mean, we at the District Resource Center are here to serve you. You're not supposed to be serving us, but we look at your websites all the time when we're trying to figure out who's pastoring where. So most websites have like our ministry team or something like that with a list. And yeah, if those are up to date, that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's it. So my wife would be a good example. So she just came on staff at the beginning of the summer, probably in June, and their website wasn't updated. And she's constantly having people say, oh, I thought you were on staff, but I don't see you on the website. So are you on staff? I feel weird to ask you, those kind of things. So yeah, it's good.
I love the suggestion, Jason, about interacting with people online, because when we were strictly online, that was just a given. That's kind of what I did, was I engaged with everybody as they were going. But now that we've got back in person, I've kind of almost forgotten about those ones. Like I'll go in afterwards and comment, but having a point person to do that right then and there, I never even thought about that. So that was brilliant. Awesome.
Good. What's some things that you guys are doing that are like, oh, this is really working for making guests feel welcome or a part of things? What's some things that you find that are working?
We actually transitioned one of our staff guys to be the online experience pastor, even though now we're back in person. We got one of our key guys who's doing that, and that's their responsibility. And even if they can't do it, like sometimes they're also doing a role in the live service. Mm-hmm. We've got a volunteer team that is moderating. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing it on YouTube as well as Facebook, you've got to have somebody to do both. That's the challenge, right? Because you don't want to leave it unmoderated, because you may have somebody go on and maybe have some difficulty, or maybe they're asking a question. And if you don't have somebody there real time, well, then you've lost that person for the day, and maybe forever, right? They may not come back, maybe their first time, and they can't get on. They say, I'll forget it. So it's tough to do because you have limited staff. So it may be a volunteer that you've got to train up to be able to run that.
And that's a whole new area of volunteerism that we haven't had necessarily at the church, or not many people had. There's a handful of people that were a little more avant before, but that new area of volunteerism at the church is real. Like it's not a negotiable anymore. You just have to have leaders in those areas for sure. Anybody else? What's some good practices that you have going on right now?
Jay, we're started a welcome Zoom meeting, and so I recorded a a welcome video of me for like 5 minutes, and then we have a lay team who is hosting a welcome huddle online after service, like in the afternoon.
Nice.
And yeah, it's trial, but we're trying.
That's good. That's good. And I think people might be open to that, even if they're in your live service. If you had a time, hey, if you're new to church and you got questions, we're gonna have a online Zoom, whatever. Here's the thing, like even at your welcome center, they might tune into that. You know what I mean? Like I'm too weirded out in person, but when I go home, maybe later on in the afternoon or in the evening, Sunday evening, it's only going to be 5 minutes, and they know that they can jump on and get more info and then get Q&A or whatever. Yeah, it's good. Anybody else?
I have more of a question.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot more new guests are tuning in to online. I have two questions, I guess. How do you make both your live service and online service feel like one service, so you're not addressing two different parties?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you cast vision to those that are attending about the online experience? Because when you do stuff online, things change, like lighting, all these things. There's moving pieces. You got cameras now. You don't want it to necessarily feel like some big show, but this is our church family here and also online. So how do you cast that vision, and how do you make them feel like one?
Good question. I think the idea is it comes back to your core values continually. So if you're constantly speaking your core values in both areas, and you're speaking the same message continually, it's, hey, we're pragmatically doing this, but it flows out of our core value. Do you know what I mean? So our online flows out of our core value, our in-person flows out of our core value, and constantly coming back to those. That the others are just methodology, but this is who we're about. So however you engage, you're getting the same heartbeat in both, right? So that's easier said than done, I get. How do you create that culture within the church? I think it's having moments that you don't make others feel less than on both sides. I think that's a really important thing. I think, sometimes I've heard pastors say, like right from the start, well, if you're too afraid to come, you're just kind of a chicken, and those people that are in person and you're not getting as good a, experience at this, like those are the wrong things to say. But instead, how do you interact with those people and create community? And that's, I think, Jesse, if you can create community within both of those. And so, yes, you're online, but we're still working at creating community. Yes, you're here, but we're working at creating community, and try and mix those two. That's kind of some of the things that I would think. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? So, yeah. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if that kind of answers or not.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Comments, questions, thoughts?
I like your idea how you did the coffee cups or whatever. We had something similar where it was like right when you walked in the door, there was a big banner that's like first time here ? And then we had a pile of these red cards, and it was kind of a map of the building with like the order of service kind of thing. So yeah, it was same deal. It was kind of like all the staff and volunteers knew, like if you see someone holding a red card, like don't all at once, but like make sure you go, and like you kind of have that heads up. We haven't done that since COVID though. So interesting. I don't know.
It's I think some of these things, and it's funny that you say that, Michael, is like you grow blind to different things. And so having fresh eyes continually come through, and ask people to come through and be fresh eyes for you. So I know for me, there was seasons when we were really good at it, and then we would kind of like get crappy, and then we would do it well again, and then we would get crappier at it. And so you just have to constantly, it takes like, oh yeah, we used to do that, or we did this, and you kind of, because you're there all the time, you kind of forget that that's important, right? Or even things as far as building aesthetic or things that come in. And so it's constantly like getting fresh eyes to look at it. And I have a whole document, if you ever guys want, on secret shopper, and to give it to people to come be a secret shopper at your church. And so somebody that just evaluates, I think it's a good practice. I used to pay somebody to come do it every once in a while and just say, you know, don't tell anyone you're here on this mission, but this, I want you to kind of give us a report, an evaluation of how we did, you know what I mean? And just have it's best if you have a non-believer do it too, but yeah, it's a little harder to do that, but yeah, good.
I like what you said too, Jay, about do what you can, do something. If you don't have the money, you can still get some team members to make people get a parking spot, or you can clean things up, or you can organize things. I think sometimes we think we have to have a huge budget to do this. We don't.
Yeah. And it's taken one step at a time. Like, just, you can't, like, don't get overwhelmed and say, oh crap, I got to do 17 things. Work on, okay, over the next month, we're going to do one thing. We're going to do one thing to up the scale on our welcoming. And then next month we'll maybe do one other thing and try and up the, it's constantly just saying, okay, let's try and up the ante a little bit better as we go along. So it's good.
I think that's a really important point, Dave, is just the getting better all the time, the incrementalism. Like, I think if you do everything at once, to be honest, you lose a lot. Because you have the momentum that you build every single week or every single month when you're adding and you're making it better and better and better. Because people notice that stuff, eh? And they want to be on board with that.
And it can come back to your purpose better when you do it one at a time like that, and remind everyone, hey, because we're on mission, this is what we're doing, and really focus in. So it's good. Well, I'm gonna get Diane to divide us up into groups just to have a minute or two to pray together, and so we'll just divide into a couple of groups here. And I want to make mention just before Diane puts us in those groups. Next week we have an event coming up, and would love for you to be a part of it. And so this is kind of an NCN event, but it's also invited the whole. And so we're doing it on online church. And so I've got this guy, Jeff Reed, who's literally probably one of the world experts on online and digital church. He's going to be sharing. He's from Miami, Florida, but he's helped in planting dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of online churches, and just really knows a lot about online church. And so we're going to be fielding questions. We're calling this new thing research and development, and so it's going to be the R&D wing, we're calling it, of new churches. And so that's next Wednesday, and we would love to have you on if you'd like to. We want people to sign up so that we go into the Zoom and know who's on there and stuff like that. And so shoot Diane an email and we will get you registered for that next Wednesday afternoon, the R&D. We're going to do another one in November and look at microchurch and the idea of, is microchurch valid, and limited ecclesiology, and how does that look with a small ecclesiastical structure to a church, and what could be. And I think as COVID's hitting, that's a pointed question these days, right? So yeah, so with no further ado, we'll break you into some small groups. Thanks for being here. Oh, and last but not least, next month, our NCN Zoom call, we've got this guy named Al Derry. Al was a mentor of mine when I was a student. I love him. He's got like a lot of encouragement, a lot of heart. You're not going to want to miss next month. Al, he planted Canada's first ever Dream Center church in Medicine Hat, Alberta, and also planted a church in Cambridge at the world's largest bar in Lulu's. And so there used to be this bar called Lulu's in Cambridge, Ontario, or Kitchener, Ontario, and by Sports World, and planted a church within the world's largest bar, or Canada's largest bar. And then he's now planting a church in Vancouver. He's just an interesting guy. You're going to like him. That's next month here on the NCN Zoom call.